Hi, I'm your State Representative Annette Glenn. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Hometown Heroes. Each episode of Hometown Heroes will feature community leaders, local nonprofits, and others who make a significant positive impact in the 98th District. The place we call home has so much to be proud of. I hope you enjoy learning from our hometown heroes. As always, if you ever have any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to contact my office. Enjoy the show.
Hello, I'm John Perry, and this is Hometown Heroes with Representative Annette Glenn. And Representative, nice to see you. Who's your guest for today?
John, I'm excited to introduce you to Ayland Stamps, who's with us from the River Jordan. He's the president and founder. Welcome.
Welcome.
Hi, how you doing?
Good to see you.
Good to have you here. Can you tell us your story and why you are so passionate about your work?
Well, my story, I was in foster care from the time I was 8 years old, and I aged out when I turned close to 19. I was in 20 different placements, so did a lot of moving around in the foster care system. My mother was a heroin addict, and that's the reason why I was removed, because of her neglect. Wasn't so much of what she did to me, it was what she didn't do for me. And so I aged out at 18, my late 18 years, and aged out into homelessness. And, through some mistakes that I made, I didn't take advantage of a lot of opportunities that was given to me throughout my foster care years. I was an angry kid, very frustrated kid. And I kind of constructed my own story on why I was removed, and I didn't really have any facts. I just kind of went off assumptions and things that I was maybe teased about in school or whatever like that, and that kind of made up my belief system about myself. And so when I aged out of foster care, I aged out into homelessness in the Cass Corridor, Detroit, right downtown. I ate out of soup kitchens and bounced around from shelter to shelter, and I couch surfed quite a bit. And within 2 years, I had accumulated about 5 felonies, and they were just anything from stealing to drug selling and stuff like that. And within those 2 years, I had was sentenced to 5 years in prison. And so I did that 5 years and got out and didn't do right on parole and went back into prison for 2 more years. And so I'm just kind of navigating through life with this same story that I aged out of foster care with. And that, along with, countless thoughts of suicide, just living in the hell of my past. And it wasn't until around 2013 where I started really addressing that past. And so we got about 30 years in there, about 25 years in there, where I lived the same story, the same belief system, and just couldn't get anywhere. And after I had my son, it was just a wake-up call. Either I was going to kill myself or be a father to my son. And I chose to be a father to my son no matter what. And it was a lot of hard work. I addressed my story. And, like the stories that we construct in our own heads, it's usually not the truth. And my story was not the truth. And once I started to address that, I started seeing the truth, that I wasn't retarded, or that I wasn't that I could graduate from college, or that I was a good person, that I did have talents, that I did have a good heart, and that I did care for other people, those kind of things. And I ended up going back to college, and with the fear. I didn't overcome the fear first. I went to college scared to death. And I graduated within 2 years, and then God called me to help youth that are aging out of foster care and foster alumni that are still struggling in their older years, 30s, 40s, and 50s. Because, foster care is definitely an ongoing recovery process. It's not something that you just kind of say, I'm over it and tuck away. Unfortunately, just like addiction recovery, there's usually a lifelong recovery process. So my passion comes from knowing that the hell that I went through, I don't want to see others going through the same thing. And, as I started to dig into understanding my foster brothers and sisters, I started to see the comparison between their recovery and my recovery and the things that they struggle with and I struggle with. And I just made a decision that for the rest of my life that I would be useful by helping them through their recovery process, and those that are struggling to make that transition. Because it really starts with transitioning out of foster care. What story are you going to leave with? Are you going to leave with the true story, or are you going to leave with the story that you made up in your head? That's where it starts from. So.
Well, and I know it took you a while.
Yes.
To address the story you made up versus the true story. Besides your son, what else helped you heal through that?
Well, I know this is not a religious program, but my relationship with God is everything to me. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that connection that I have with my higher power. So that my son and just being tired of living in my own prison. Just being sick and tired of being sick and tired. Sick of self-sabotaging relationships. Sick of not enjoying the goodness of life and what it has to offer. And sick of not feeling like I'm good enough for anything. Those are the kind of things that brought me to this. And I know there's other people that has experienced foster care that are feeling the same way, so that's where my passion lies.
Well, I certainly could see when I visited your presentation how the kids believed you because you lived what they lived. When you said, I went through this, it wasn't some theory. You'd lived it, and I would guess maybe in worse circumstances than the kids I met there.
Well, I don't want to minimize different circumstances for sure. I know you're not, but I've heard some stories that made me feel like, okay, I didn't really have it so bad, and them taking the blame for why they were in foster care, when we tell them that they're in foster care at no fault of their own, they don't really understand what that really means. So, say for instance, okay, so when I was removed from my mother, I was under the assumption that it was because all of the things that I was teased about. I had no other point of reference except for, I'm an ugly kid, I'm in special ed, I couldn't play baseball, I couldn't catch a football, all that kind of stuff like that. When really the truth is that my mother was a heroin addict and she wasn't fit to take care of me at the time. And another fact is that when you're an addict, you can't take care of your kids. You can't, there's certain things that addiction just won't allow you to do. And it has nothing to do with whether your mother or father loves you or not, because the addiction takes over and addiction does what it wants to do. So it's not, I was navigating through foster care under the assumption that my mother and father didn't love me at all, and that was not the truth. The truth is that my mother was an addict, a heroin addict, and if you understand what heroin addiction does to the body and how you become chemically dependent, once you understand that and see that, then your whole story kind of changes a little bit. Then you could say, oh, wow, that's a really powerful thing that my mother is going through, and it has nothing to do with me. You see? Yes. So that's where you can start to change your story and then navigate it a little bit better through foster care and have relationships with foster parents. Because I was on the assumption that if my mother didn't love me, then who else could? You understand what I'm saying?
And I would think sort of that attachment piece, especially if you're going through 18, 20 placements, would just be huge.
Yeah, but and 18 and 20 placements it only had to be one. I could have got into foster care and got my own my foster home, and that could have been a great relationship. But because they were knocking at the doors of my vulnerability and my insecurities and me being in fear of opening up to them, I would self-sabotage relationships subconsciously. Just sometimes consciously though. But a lot of times it was subconscious, they're getting a little bit closer to me, and so I would just do little things and push on their boundaries and overstep boundaries and not follow rules just because.
So you were expecting them to ask you to leave.
Yes.
So you came up, created reasons so that you would be asked to leave so that you would understand it.
And then it became so embedded in my belief system that I would just self-sabotage stuff without even knowing it, without even realizing what I was doing.
So from there, how did you get to starting the River Jordan, and how was it different from what you experienced in foster care?
So I started River Jordan because based on my own experience, because I've been through so much. I've lived a lot of those statistics. So I started River Jordan based on my own experience, and I started to see that 90% of the foster youth that were current and former are living the same thing. What was the second part of the question?
How did you start River Jordan?
How did I start it?
How did you start it?
Well, I started by kind of writing down a program of what I thought would work for me, because I was a hard-headed person. So that's where the start came from, and I reached out to some friends of mine and talked to them about the program, and they were excited about it. And then we formed a board, and then that's how we started it. And it was based on recovery. River Jordan is based on the recovery process of healing from trauma of abuse and neglect. Everything else is secondary, like the housing is secondary, linking youth to different resources, that's secondary. If you don't have any recovery, you're going to blow the resources, you're going to blow the connections that you made, you're going to blow the relationships, you're going to blow the housing and stuff like that. So it has to all start with recovery.
So somebody's got to be willing to recover and do that hardest part first before anything else comes.
Well, you can do that simultaneously. So it's kind of like if I want to stop using drugs, the first thing I have to do is stop using, because you're gonna get high if you don't not use. So the first thing you got to do is stop using, and then you work on your recovery at the same time you're not using. So when it comes to transition age foster youth, when you're transitioning out of foster care between 14 and 18, you have to first not sabotage the relationships, and then you work on the things that make you want to sabotage relationships, the why, the story.
So 14 is the earliest you start working with kids, or are you trying to catch them a little earlier than even 14?
14, because that's the transition age. There's a lot of things that happens in the early years of foster care if you're coming in at the age of, 6 years old like me or even younger. There is that process of loss. So there's going to be anger, there's going to be temper tantrums, and those kind of things that really therapists could help you with, or psychologists, or maybe there's medications involved with that to help you not hurt yourself or others. And then there is the age of where you start to wonder about recovery. You start to wonder about your story. You start to wonder, could I be wrong here? You know what I'm saying? But when you're young like that, when you're, 6, 7, 8 years old, leading up to your teens, you don't really think about those kind of things. So we feel like we feel like that the age of transition, that transition age starts at 14 and up to 23.
Great. So what does the state of Michigan need to do to help reduce the shocking statistics of transition age foster youth?
Start thinking about recovery. The state of Michigan does a really good job with offering assistance to youth, like car matching. They do that dollar for dollar matching up to like $3,500, and then they might give you a laptop if you sign up for college, or they might give you clothes and food stamps and stuff like that. State of Michigan's always done a great job in helping provide those different things, but the end goal for anything with the state of Michigan as far as assistance is self-sufficiency. So, we want to achieve a self-sufficiency is the end goal. But what do you do to keep that self-sufficiency? So if you give me a laptop computer and I go to college, but then I don't think I'm good enough to graduate anyway, that feeling good enough, that story, that's part of recovery. The changing that story is part of recovery. So recovery is based on awareness. Okay, so are you aware of why you were in foster care? Okay, what is the awareness? Are you aware of what addiction does to a person? Are you aware of those kind of things? Are you aware of mental illness? Are you aware of the why you were removed? So then once you become aware of why, then you can transition into understanding. How do I understand this awareness? Do I understand that it's not my fault? Do I understand that this is a problem that my parents have, okay, and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with me? And then once you're aware and then you understand, now you move into an acceptance. Can I accept this? And how do I accept the understanding of what I'm aware of? How do I accept that? And then you move into the steps of forgiveness, okay? And then forgiveness is usually the lifelong process of forgiveness. It's just like, maybe an example could be if a husband cheats on his wife, okay, and she forgives him, okay, but she doesn't forget about it. She doesn't forget about it. And then there's a healing process for that. 10, 15 years later, something might be triggered. He might do something that might trigger a memory. She's got to forgive all over again. It might take a day. It might take a couple of hours. It might take a week. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So that's the trauma that you have to forgive, and that could go on for a lifetime.
So I know River Jordan is newer. Think 5, 6 years down the road, if somebody comes to you at 14, what's going to happen between 14 and 23? Just walk us through that vision.
Okay, so we meet the young person at age 14, and first of all, our coaches would be alumni. Okay, so that's a very important piece of our program, is that alumni are helping those who are in transition. So we meet the youth right where they're at. It could be a foster home or a group home placement, and then we start the coaching relationship. We help them understand how to build relationships. We help them understand how to keep relationships. We help them become aware of why they're in foster care, aware of how you understand what you're aware of. You know, we try to help them, coach them through the forgiveness part, the acceptance part. And then we start linking them to organizations in society that will help them get to where they're trying to go. Michigan Works, the FAST program down at SVSU, helping them obtain proper identification like Social Security cards and stuff like that, helping them understand landlord-tenant relationships because they're going to have to rent an apartment. What if they want to buy a house? Help them through that. Help them through the self-reunification process, because most youth, when they age out of foster care, they want to go back to the parents and they want to, figure out the why and all that kind of stuff. So the coaches help them break down the expectations that they have of that reunification process. So we're kind of bridging the gap between those different aspects of recovery and linking them to different resources in society. And so by the time they age out at 18, our hopes is to see them get their own apartments, and now they're going to college and they have a plan and a vision and all that kind of stuff like that. So, but however, we do have a housing program that they come into our transition housing program and they get out there and they make a mistake or they don't spend their money right or something like that. Then they have a place to come back to. They have, an apartment to come to, and then our coaches get together with them and find out, okay, where did you go wrong in this, and how can we help you? Do you need more financial literacy? Do you need to understand budgeting? Are you going out to eat too much, or do we have a drug problem to deal with? How can we link you to AA meetings and NA meetings and get you set up with a addiction recovery coach or some counseling? And then our coaches hold them accountable to their vision, hold them accountable to their treatment plan. So that's kind of how we get through that. And then also we have a thing called, it's like an ongoing recovery for youth that are past age 23. So it might be foster alumni that are 30, 40 years old that are still trying to recover from this, from their foster care experience. And so we're able to coach them and meet them right where they're at on that also.
If somebody wanted to get involved and volunteer, how could they help, and where would they find you?
They can find us right online at riverjordaninc.org, and just go to the volunteer link and just fill out the application there and talk about what they want to do, or they can email us at admin@riverjordaninc.org, and they can get a hold of us from there. So
I know you've been doing some fundraising for some property,
mm-hmm.
and then the vision is to build additional housing, correct?
Well, the vision is to partner with landlords that are in the community and sublet to our youth transitioning out of foster care. So our goal is to not create a placement, another placement, and segregate them and put them all in one building. We want to integrate them into the community. So we would get into a lease agreement with area landlords or apartment complexes, and then sublet that lease with other things that, you know, as far as our program goes, they need to see their coach twice a week, or they need to go to foster care recovery meetings once every 2 weeks. They have to be working part-time or going to school part-time or volunteering somewhere part-time. These are all of the other conditions added to whatever lease that we're subletting to them.
So if you had to tell us in one sentence, what would the vision statement for the River Jordan be?
Our mission statement is to empower current and former foster youth to take responsibility of their own individual lives and become productive members of society.
Ayland, we've been talking a lot about coaching. It sounds like that's an integral part of every part of the process. Something the state does that could be duplicated?
Yes, so the state of Michigan has adopted the recovery coaches, and so River Jordan has adopted the same model, but for youth that are transitioning out of foster care and for alumni that are still struggling. So that's the most important piece of our program is foster alumni helping others who are struggling currently and who are transitioning out of foster care. So if the state could come alongside of that and say, yeah, you know, there is a place in foster care where we see that coaches are necessary to help youth aging out of foster care and foster alumni, that would be very helpful, because we can't build those kind of services currently. But the addiction recovery, you know, they have coaches in place, and they're able to bill for those kind of services. So we're kind of just waiting for the state to say, hey, this is also important.
Another part.
Yeah, of transition. So, yeah.
Okay, Representative Annette Glenn, good to be with you.
Thank you.
Ayland, good to be with you too.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us.